Do you want to try to say the thing live?
Do I want to what?
Do you want to try to say the thing live while I play the song?
I mean, you can. Which one am I saying?
Just the opening. Like.
I don't know the script.
That's alright, I'll insert it later. Anyways.
If I had it in front of me, I could.
Yeah. I can't remember where it is. Anyways. We're live and everything. Welcome to another very special episode of the Verhoeven Effect. I'm Conlon.
I'm Nathan.
Yeah, we have a very special because we're live.
Yeah, we're in the same room. This happens once every... This is the first time, I've been here in 2.5 years?
Yeah, probably.
I've never been here,
yeah,
actually.
You've never been here, so yeah.
This is in the new location, and put your address out there, because nothing can go bad doing that.
Yes, I'm still here. The lonely Google Meet call.
Oh, we're going to have to correct that every 5 minutes?
I don't think so. But
Oh,
we'll see.
okay.
Have to invite a random person. Yeah, so we didn't want to go too hard on this episode because people were traveling and things were happening. So we watched 1998's Sphere.
And we were rewarded for it. We learned a little bit about ourselves along the way.
Well, I remember this being classically being a movie where it's like everyone says the book is way better.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I did read the book recently for the first time, and I don't know,
It follows.
The movie's the book.
Yeah, it follows the story.
The book is better, but that's because you get
More detail.
Yeah, you get that fantastic Michael Crichton exposition that's like that immediately gets cut out of any Hollywood movie because it's waste time and most people are bored by it.
How to cook in a heliox environment. Why lab equipment won't work in a helium oxygen environment. I mean, it's fun. It's not boring. It's like, oh, I never thought of that and never will, but it's cool.
And so, of course, off the, well, I guess this is going to be directly off Jurassic Park. I think Congo's like in the middle of there somewhere, but...
Yeah, I didn't check the origin of those classics.
But this does feel like, for a weird reason, it does feel like Jurassic Park just underwater for some reason,
Yeah.
But it might even be like produced by Spielberg or something. Cause I think this is directed by Barry Levinson, who's probably most notable for Rain Man. Did thing like Wag the Dog, like at the same time he was doing this movie.
Yeah. Had a great cast.
Oh yeah. This is a fantastic cast. Cinematographer Adam Greenberg, who most notable for he was director of photography on both Terminator movies, Terminator 1 and 2.
Oh, okay.
This released February 13th, 1998. So, I think this movie's all right, a good idea, but like I think like 6 months before this you had Event Horizon.
Yeah.
Which is not a better movie, but it's like a similar tone kind of movie in a way. Well, not really tone, but it's a similar kind of movie that just kind of ate its lunch in some ways.
Yeah. It's kind of it's like a haunted house movie, but it doesn't really pay off.
Yeah.
By the time you know what's going on, you're just like, well, I got all the way to here, and this was the end of the journey. Okay, great.
Although the failing of the movie where it's like it just kind of ends and we're basically pretending like nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
It's exactly how it happens in the book.
Yeah.
So it's built-in disappointment. I have to say, like, of all the Michael Crichton books I read, this Sphere was kind of like, even though it was super interesting, it was the most disappointing Michael Crichton book I've read. So,
it seemed like much like the movie, fiction, much like the movie work, the fictional written work, kind of ran out of gas. It's like, what's our idea? Oh yeah, it's imagination. Okay, great. There's so many different ways you could have gone with this premise.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it in the book or the movie.
This has a weird written by credit. It has Kurt Wimmer has an adaptation credit, which I don't know what that means.
Huh.
And then Stephen Hauser and Paul Antonazio separately get screenplay credit, and then it's based on a Michael Crichton novel. Kurt Wimmer we know from, he does a lot of like action movies. I don't know if you remember like Salt. He did the Equilibrium movie. He directed that.
Okay, yeah.
He writes a lot of like sort of stupid techno thriller.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you ever. I never seen it, but if you ever seen the trailer for Law Abiding Citizen.
I've seen the movie.
Okay, so that's Kurt Wimmer.
Yeah,
or if you remember that Colin Farrell The Recruit movie with like Al Pacino.
Yes, yeah.
Which is like cool half a movie and then becomes incredibly stupid. So that's Kurt Wimmer. It's like it's cool for a second and then becomes incredibly stupid.
Yeah, it's like Equilibrium was some of the best like action set pieces in a really convoluted story ever. Some people act like that's like a meaningful movie. It's like, no, it's just vaguely cool.
Yeah.
Cool concepts, but the overall story, it's like, well, okay.
What if The Matrix was psychology? And of course, this movie has a fantastic cast with Dustin Hoffman, Sharon Stone, Samuel L. Jackson, Peter Coyote, who's basically like, oh, that guy.
Yeah.
Liev Schreiber, and of course, Queen Latifah.
Yep.
For about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Although in the book, here, there's 2 Navy personnel on this underwater base. In the book, there's like 30 people and they all die. But yeah.
Yeah, because they have, you got the 4 scientists, you got Peter Coyote, I can't think of his name. Barnes, retired Captain Barnes. And then you have the Queen Latifah character is like their communications technician, repair person. And then you have another lady who's an archivist. And then you have the cook. She's also, she plays a prominent small role. And it's like, oh, she's a cook trained to work in this insane environment. And then you have a third person, or so you have another person who does something. But yeah, they all basically just die in short order.
But here they shorten that up.
Yeah.
So we have Act 1. We have a really long opening credit sequence with like pictures of like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. A fast forwardable credit sequence.
Yeah, you don't get anything out of it. It's just names and pictures.
Like, look, we made a movie. Look at our names.
Well, yeah, I know we have a big cast like that sometimes. You're just like, sometimes there's that kind of preamble. It's like, all right, everybody get your popcorn. You're in for some entertainment.
We're setting the frame.
Which I was confused by. There was a recut of Star Trek: The Motion Picture on Paramount Plus, and it was like there's like 15 minutes of just a star field. I'm like, what the hell is this about? Nathan's like, oh, that's back in the day when they used to do that for like you're getting ready for a picture. But that was also like back in the day when you had like a 1-screen theater and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's called the Overture. That's when I was also like people were still coming to movies in a suit. It was kind of a holdover from a formal because like Ben-Hur has that.
Yeah,
has like a 20-minute, but it's an actual orchestra, like recording this song live onto the film track. I don't think they did that for the motion picture. I think it was pre-recorded. But yeah. That was that's an old school way of doing that.
And then Ben-Hur also has like intermission too. That's where you go off and smoke and then talk about what you've seen so far.
Yeah. You go talk to the dames.
We have a helicopter flying over the sea, and I wrote that as being Jurassic Park-esque when they're flying to the park. We got Dustin Hoffman as Norman. He's sleeping on the ride over, and he wakes up and talks to Huey Lewis, who plays the pilot.
Yeah. Doesn't sing at all.
No, just gives him the news. Or the lack of thereof.
Yeah. And does a pretty good job, I guess. I mean, for a guy just yelling his lines loud over a helicopter, it's like, yeah, I can see that. He looks the type.
He's a psychologist, and the helicopter pilot mentions that like they've been bringing all kinds of scientists out to the sea, but Norman's told it's a plane crash, but the helicopter's guy's like, they didn't tell me that. So
yeah.
there's like an armada of U.S. ships, although, I don't know what makes up an armada. There's like 9 really big, large ships out there, so that's enough. Then we get titles. It just says The Surface, which this probably correlates to the novel. I know the novel has like headlines for every chapter and stuff or something like that, but I can't remember if it correlates here.
Yeah, it's the same kind of stuff. Like for every 5 chapters, we're changing location like that.
Yeah. Which makes the movie, which I don't know, this probably is what makes the movie the weirdest, is that like it moves along very quickly, but it feels very disjointed somehow.
Yeah. Because, well, some of those, like the surface, the deep, the alien or the ship, or it's like you're expecting like, oh, the story's moving forward, but it's like, no, it's just the same story. You just have this title card in there. It's like, oh, is things going to change now? No, they're not. It's...
Oh yeah, I forgot to ask. Like, do you have any history with this movie? Like, do you remember seeing when it came out or anything?
I watched it. I didn't see this one in theaters because I remember there was like an initial like, oh, it's like hot lava. Like, don't grab this handle. This is a bad movie. So I was like, well, I'm not gonna go spend $30 to see that at the theater or whatever it cost then. So I was familiar with the book from years ago, years earlier in high school. The book is like, what, 1987?
I can't remember. Let me look that up.
I think it's an 87 book. But yeah, I remember.
I thought I heard 97, but that I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, I remember it reading the book when I was younger, like in high school. Because I read all the Michael Crichton books because they were all cool.
Yep, 87.
Okay.
Okay, that makes some of the weirdness of the book make more sense now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of...
we have a whole gigabyte of memory in this station. It's like, wow, really? That's a...
Well, stuff I thought was weird. There's a lot of things where it's like you have like a black mathematician and like he's talking about like, the plight of the black people, from Michael Crichton's perspective. So it's kind of just weird and disjointed. Where it's like, I guess okay, you have your observations, Michael, but... and there was a weird one where like Beth was talking about like not knowing what Medusa is, and he's just like, this far flung in the future, like now science is overriding myth. And like, the fuck are you talking about, Michael?
We've forgotten our dreams, our fantasies of horrible things that will kill us. We need those. We need to hold on to our myths.
And like the Beth character in general is also just kind of like seems to be poorly written, because it's like, well, she's the woman, so she's going to be the weak point, and then she is in the movie. So
and in the book, because I just re-listened to the audiobook, and in the book it's like, oh, you're saying in the 80s that she's like looks like a lesbian, like it's just this very muscular woman who is not portrayed that way, because it's like, no, she got divorced and she kind of, is upset with her ex-husband, and she feels like, yeah, they don't take women seriously, but then you act like a nut through the whole novel. And it's like, well, maybe there's a reason why, or at least in your case, why they're not taking you seriously.
Yeah.
There was no romance between her and Norman in the book.
No. I mean, there's barely as here, other than they had a previous relationship.
Yeah.
That was associated to somebody else, but it wasn't on the team. It was just somebody else that like took credit for people's work. I don't think they're on the team, though.
No. Well, because they also had like a 5th scientist, but he like was barely in the book, and then he became claustrophobic on the trip down, so they had to bring him back. And it's like, well, that was it. Okay. So that thread's not being followed, not in the movie, but in the book that was there. So they did streamline this movie a lot, but they still yet made it a boring cinematic experience.
It's still a long movie, even though they streamlined it.
Yeah. And it's not fun.
Well, see, I remember watching. I remember hearing bad things about it, and then I saw it like on cable, and I thought it was a cool movie. But mostly because I'm more enticed by the idea rather than the execution. Which now I can see the flaws of the movie now watching it. But still a cool idea that wasn't pulled off.
No,
that they didn't pull off. So yeah, Norman thinks he's gonna like be administering like help for like post-traumatic patients or something, because he's told there's a plane crash. Liev Schreiber shows up. He's Ted, the astrophysicist. We have Beth, played by Sharon Stone. and it's like they recognize each other. They see each other for like half a moment.
Yeah.
The Normans are scored away by the Navy guy Barnes. He's played by Peter Coyote. He's part of the. Oh, he talks about the ULF. It's like I can't remember what it's called. It's like a mythical report of like what happens if we discovered an alien life form, and like, what would the team that we put together, and that's what Norman's here for, is because he wrote up the report. Although
this report has existed in fiction as a fiction device in a lot of novels.
Yeah,
it's how you get that non-military, like everyman character who's also like a genius at whatever he does, and he wrote this report, and he's like, they just paid me money for it, and I filed it away. I have heard this exact same scenario in I think they did it in Footfall, which is a science fiction novel. A couple Alien Contact novels. It's always like the writer creates himself as this character, and it's like, yeah, the government paid me to do. That's why they're bringing this guy in who has no knowledge of, because the astrophysicist, the mathematician, like they make sense.
Yeah.
The biologist makes sense. Psychologist doesn't really make a lot of sense to like, yeah, we're going to send you in the most dangerous environment known to man.
Well, it's fun to send the psychologist because it's like, well, he's a smart person. But in this instance, he's the most useless and dumbest person, so he gets to ask the audience surrogate questions because he doesn't know.
Right. But yeah, this mythical report about alien contact has been a trope of science fiction writers, I think, since the 50s.
Yeah.
It's like, we're always bringing this guy in. Well, you wrote this report, and it's always the same thing. I thought it was a joke. Always the same. This is not an original idea at all.
I just ripped off the government with my fantasies.
Yeah, if you've read any kind of science fiction from any era, that this always exists.
Although I do think in the book there's something where like Norman's like the last guy in the book, because they emphasize in the book where he's like 50 years old and he's out of shape compared to everybody else, and he's like the last psychologist on the list because for some reason they take him, and it was like, well, you could have died on the descent down because your health isn't good enough.
Yeah.
You managed to survive. Is that light in your eyes? I can move it.
No,
Okay.
I was just staring at something.
Yeah, so the reports about a possible encounter with an alien being. There's a giant airplane / spacecraft that's crashed on the ocean. They determine it's like 288 years old. Samuel L. Jackson, the mathematician Harry, is there. He's like he does the math of like 288 years, so he's a mathematician because he can do addition and subtraction.
Yep.
Here, all the scientists ridicule psychology. But I don't get the explicit so it's a spacecraft.
Yeah.
But then it happens to have a giant like tail on it, like it's meant to be an aircraft.
Yeah, because they say it's just like this wing surface that's 300 feet high or something.
Yeah.
But then they never like.
And that's how it's described in the book. But also in the book, there's like, this was built in space. It's like, why would a spaceship need a wing?
Yeah.
But it looks cool when you get to look at it. So.
Well, also in the book, they take a side trip. They spend a lot more time in the spaceship and talking about it, because it's like, oh, look at all these cross braces. It's incredibly, because Barnes is an aeronautical engineer from MIT or something.
Yeah.
Before he was a captain of a space or a Navy ship, space starship. So yeah, they had but they're talking about like all the lead and stuff inside it, and it's like, oh, this thing must have a tremendous power plant to move this thing, and but they don't really go into that in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. They in the book
or in the movie.
in the movie they spend like maybe like 15 minutes in the spaceship, and
Yeah.
and in the book it's like half the book. Like they're always going back there, but it's also always changing when they go back there. And then we have the teams being interviewed about their health. This is where Norman tells Harry that his report was a fraud. He just like picked people he knew.
Yeah.
Which that wasn't in the book, so this whole scene is improvised by Dustin Hoffman. But it's a fun scene.
Yeah, I mean, it just establishes the cast.
Yeah. Then they have to go for a saturation dive. The danger of decompression is explained, which they got to do in every kind of these movies. So I like that there's always like this like tremendous like action under the sea stuff that has really cool and then always fails at the box office.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to work out.
It's like Abyss is such a cool movie and nobody saw it. Well, not nobody, but you know.
It wasn't, it's not remembered as...
It's like the least successful James Cameron movie.
Yeah. And the fact that people almost died making it is like even more sad, because it's like Ed Harris almost lost his life over this movie and no one's seen it.
So have that being the end of Act 1, so we know that there's, hey, there's a giant spaceship in the ocean. It appears to be very old, so let's go there and look at it. So we have Act 2, got titles, The Deep. The team boards a diving sub. They head 1,000 feet below. They see the tail of the spaceship. It's like it's huge. It's absolutely gigantic. They have it lit up. Because I think like the ship's supposed to be like, was it supposed to be like a mile wide and just even longer or something like that?
Yeah, it was a mile long.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure how wide it was, like 2 football fields wide or something. It was this massive,
The Navy set up like an undersea base down there, apparently, which, I don't know, like how long would it take to just like hastily assemble a base in the ocean?
I'm not sure. It seemed...
Or in the book, was it just already there and just happened to be by it? Or, no, they'd have to put it down there.
No, in the book it was a cable laying company was laying a communications cable and it got hooked on the wing.
Yeah.
And then they came and set up a base. Apparently that stuff was like ready, made to go, and they just had to send the guys out there and drop it to the bottom. But in the book, it's all fraught with technical problems, and it's not very good. And it's because they talk about in the book several times. It's like, yeah, anyone who's tried to go down this deep for any length of time, they always get killed. It's a good way to kill a lot of people, and that's actually true. But that's why people go down, in the diving suits and do things and then decompress on the surface for a week or whatever.
Yeah. There's just 2 personnel working on the base. Like I said in the book, it's a bit more, but here they gotta roll through. It's like, no, we need less people to kill.
Yeah.
The team decompress with helium, and it's kind of a funny scene because all their voices get high pitched and everything. And then Barnes like, quit fucking around, put on your voice modulators. But you don't see. I don't know. Is that a thing that happens?
I don't know much about saturation diving. I know there's like nitrogen. There's a term for it, like nitrogen poisoning or nitrogen psychosis.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
It's like, because under pressure, because of how the gas reacts, it becomes like a drug that affects your brain. So you substitute helium. But the problem is helium dissipates heat so much faster than oxygen or nitrogen. Like you would just you get hypothermia. So that's why everything has to be heated. And I know there is something called triox, which is oxygen, helium, and a little bit of nitrogen, but not the same mixture that you would encounter at sea level. But I don't know how it all works.
Yeah, I think in the book they explain that like. They basically have to get the oxygen level, because air is a mixture of oxygen, nitrogen, some other stuff.
Yeah, mostly nitrogen, but yeah.
But they have to make a mixture that's so like low in oxygen for them, so like their bodies can work down there, and they just have to acclimate to it. But like, it becomes more fraught with panic in the book, because anytime they have to like exert themselves, they like reiterate the point. It's like, oh, you don't know how hard this is on like this low of oxygen at this pressure and all that stuff.
Well, you're essentially doing what's under that. You're doing what the medical term is like Cheyne-Stokes breathing, where you're just forcing your diaphragm in and out, like it's not happening completely naturally. So it's very exhausting.
Again, a lot here we're talking about the cool, details of the book and not so in the movie.
Yeah. In the movie, it's like everyone talks like Mickey Mouse, and it's funny. But if they went to the surface suddenly, they would explode like a water balloon, dropped on the pavement.
The team discussed like potential harmful aliens, like whether it's intended or not intended. Like like what is this thing? Is this a Trojan horse or what is it? Then we got titles, the spacecraft, and so the team are in dive suits and they make their way over to the spacecraft. They get in an airlock and like they pump out the water, and so now they're like next to an entryway to the spaceship, but it's in air now because they pumped the water out. It's got like a little tube thing that's connected to it, so they can do that. Because they're like those docking things in space and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And here we missed, because there was like Navy divers did that mysteriously before they got there, and they fucked off. So
Yeah.
they had to go blow up some Middle Eastern country.
Yeah, they had other things to do.
Beth just kind of touches the door and opens. I think first there's the point of like somebody saying like, oh, this has to be super strong, meaning that it's like never corroded for 300 years. And then someone says it's soft, and then Ted like kind of bangs on it with a chisel and it breaks, and then Harry's like, why did the impenetrable steel just chip when he hit it with a hammer? Which they never they
don't
hit.
come back to that. It's like, oh, did the coral like leach some important thing out of it as it was growing on it? No, it's never explained.
And then Beth kind of touches the door and it opens for her, and they're kind of mad at her first, like, don't just do things. So the ship is absolutely huge, so the team splits up. And the soundtrack has a very kind of ominous kind of horror movie thing to it, so you're expecting something bad to happen. Beth and Norman like kind of accidentally operate an elevator, and they're kind of brought up to like, I don't know, like sort of like the bridge or something like that. I think, I don't know. There's chairs up there as video displays.
It seems to be, yeah.
The ship's hull is like a combination of steel and rubber. Ted finds English and Spanish writing. It says like trash and basura on there, and they're like, trash, basura, and like a really like idiotic like like I can't believe it says English and Spanish. Like, what does it mean? It's like, I don't know, dude. Looks like it's English and Spanish.
Did the aliens know English and Spanish? 300 years ago?
I mean, it is a conundrum, but I find that, these scientists incredulous at that moment.
Yeah, people with like 160 IQs just blown away at the...
Trash, what does it mean? Beth and Norman find a body. It's human. They figure out that it's an American spaceship that's 288 years old. Beth accesses the computer logs, and there's like it's like a holographic touchscreen. And again, this is 98, so some of the CGI effects are decent. They're very sparing with what they do, so they don't like look too bad.
Right.
But
yeah.
they are kind of aged. And here there's a bunch of log entries, and one of them says unknown entry event, and then there's like a holographic projection showing the ship flying through space and into a black hole and through the event horizon, or as our understanding of it at that time. So it looks cool, but it doesn't look as cool as Interstellar. So
Well, now here's another divergence from the book, because in the book they find someone sitting in a chair, and they're like, oh, look at the body, there's no decomposition. And then they look closer, and they realize it has cables running from it, and it's some kind of robot. It wasn't a human body in the book, which means they sent it into a black hole on purpose.
Yeah.
Which is not really made clear in the movie, because it doesn't have to be, but...
Oh, yeah. There's... The mystery of the plane is never solved in the movie.
No.
I mean, yeah, this whole movie's invalidated by basically what is a slightly more complicated, it was all a dream.
Yeah.
Although here in the movie they do add the extra mysterious thing of like, okay, they forget the sphere, but then everybody sees the sphere fly away. So what does that mean? Apparently nothing. So, but it's a bit more than what you get in the book.
Well, once they suss all this out, it is interesting. Like Samuel L. Jackson makes a cool point. It's like, so this ship's been here 300 years. It's an American spaceship. It's from the future, and we know about it. We didn't tell anyone. They didn't know it was down here, so that means we're dead. It's like just immediately jumps to like, we can make that leap to logic immediately.
Which makes his character both cool and weird. Exceptionally weird.
Yeah, like this jump to the worst possible thing.
Well, I'm dead. Anyways, have you guys read this book?
Yeah. Try some of these eggs. Shit is amazing.
Barnes calls and they go to look at the sphere, the titular sphere. It's a golden sphere with like a liquid metal surface, although that's what it looks like. Although some other descriptions it says like it's almost like mercury, but mercury's liquid at this temperature. Is like, dude, it looks like liquid.
Yeah.
So I think there's a disconnect there between like the special effects department and the written dialogue.
Yeah, because they're just looking at like some black thing with lights on it in real life. And like, yeah, this might, which you wouldn't speculate on. It's like, this could be the surface of Mercury, or a Mercury like surface. Like, it could be anything. It's alien. And if it's Mercury, it's really toxic. You need to get out of there.
Well, I read some trivia that said that like in the book it's described more as a silver sphere with like some sort of kind of like basically like kind of like almost machine like stuff on that you can tell like occasionally it seems like, oh, this was built. Here it seems more of a weird like metallic organic thing. But I heard that they tried to make it like a silver sphere, but like when they were filming it, it just came off as like pure black.
Okay.
Like under the in the film, and so they had to like change it to make it more.
Which they should have stuck with, because then when you heard the people describing it and you're not seeing it, then you could have established that dreamlike dissociation. But no, everyone would get hung up on it. It's just crappy special effect. It's like, no, it's supposed to create an air of wonder and dissociation. But no, that doesn't fly.
Yeah, so yeah, Barnes is worried it's a trap. So like that's the thing in the book where Barnes is always like the guy who's like thinking about defense first, and all the scientists are like, "No, this is a wondrous new thing. We've met a new alien life. We need to like study it and cultivate it." And Barnes is like, "This thing could kill us all."
And he wasn't wrong.
Yeah, Barnes is right. Then I don't know if they do this in the book or not, but there's a cool moment where Norman's like pointing out, it's like, hey guys, this is kind of weird. Why is it reflecting everything but us?
Yeah.
Which I don't remember that being a point in the book, but it's
No, I don't think that was ever. And again, like you said in the book, it was more like this kind of weird looking mechanical sphere that is like, but in the movie it takes on this like T-1000 quality of like, what is this liquid metal? And how is it reacting to us?
And then we have titles, the analysis. So the team are eating and speculating on what happened to the spacecraft. A computer message comes in saying there's a storm, a Pacific cyclone. It's coming in, so the Armada leave. Ted wants to stay and observe, but everyone's else like, no, let's get out of here. It's an American spaceship. Like, it's like mystery solved. It's like, and he's like, there's a little bit more to it than that. But you know, that's like the fun thing about. I guess it's a fun conceit, but it's also like, it's always like convenient that the most like, you know, important discovery in the lifetime has like this ticking time clock on it. It's like, we can only observe it in this one time and it's gone forever. So we have Harry and Norman discussing the sphere. Norman thinks it's alive because it chooses what to reflect. And then he says, like, just kind of coldly, it's like, we're all going to die down here, you know? And this is where he describes it like, it's like, this ship's from the future, right? And Norman's like, yeah. It's like, well, the last entry says unknown event, so obviously we never told anybody about the spaceship, so we all died down here. Which, I don't know, that's, I guess that was consistent with like the time paradox of the time, but even the book, they speculate like this could be from a different universe, so that isn't necessarily a paradox for the movie. It's like this could be a separate universe that the ship is from, and so it doesn't matter whether it's from the future, it's from a different future. So
yeah, you're not bound by what's that called, the
is it like grandfather paradox or something like that, where like you go back in time and kill your grandfather or something like that?
This is more like a multiverse thing.
Yeah,
instead of a causality. Yeah, you don't have a causality violation because it's from a slightly different, almost indistinguishable future, but it doesn't mean that, like, this has to follow in a linear fashion.
Yeah. Alarms start going off. They see Harry's on the video. He's, like, approaching the sphere. Harry's image, like, reflects on the sphere, and then it kind of, like, crawls up the sphere in a very kind of weird, like, effect.
Odd pancake effect.
Yeah, he looks like Judge Doom from Who Framed Roger Rabbit when he gets flattened by the steamroller.
Which might have been intentional. We don't know.
And then, like, he just kind of disappears for a moment, and then Norman gets his suits on, runs in there, and then he finds Harry just kind of appears unconscious in front of the sphere.
He, like, materializes, like, just.
And then you see, like, Norman's reflection kind of appear on the sphere and crawl up in the same way, but then the power goes out, so nobody sees that. The power line from the surface gets cut, and the Armada leaves. Harry's asleep back at the station. Then we cut to titles, The Power. Norman's drinking some tea. A jellyfish goes by the front of the window. Fletcher, played by Queen Latifah, she goes out to take... There's like a data dump that they bring to an emergency sub that, like, if they don't reset it every 12 hours, it automatically goes up to, like, at least give the surface an idea of, like, what happened after the last data that's in there. So they set that up. But then jellyfish start going up, start just appearing out of nowhere. And at first she's like, oh, this looks beautiful. And then they just start grabbing her, stinging her. And then eventually they just, like, rip open her suit, and then she just drowns inside the suit. So
Yeah.
In the book, it's a thing where it's like, they didn't have time to build a morgue down here, and so they just, like, float to the surface. But here they bring him inside and do, like, an autopsy on him. So, and, like, the puppet they make of Queen Latifah, you know, looks horrifying. You know, it's like, oh yeah, she died in extreme pain and drowned.
Yeah.
Let's see here. This is the weird thing, because Norman, like, because, like, her death is being broadcast throughout the station.
Yeah.
And Norman's just kind of sitting there drinking tea, like, huh.
It's a hell of a thing.
But she's, like, the most emotional person, like, has to consider, like, it's like, no, this is a bad thing, but here it's, like, weird. But I think that if you go back, you know, upon a second viewing, it's like, okay, Norman went in the sphere. Coming out of the sphere makes you weird for a bit. Like, you're not attuned to emotions for a bit. Although it seems that, like, Harry really never gets his emotions back. He's just weird the whole time. But they also explain he was been a genius his entire lifetime. So, yeah.
Yeah, like he graduated, MIT when he was 17 or something. Yeah.
And then you see some code pop up on the computer for a bit. We have Beth performing the autopsy, and then Norman standing by. He tells a story about, like, he had, like, an encounter with a jellyfish when he was a kid, which I think is different in the book. And then, like, his brother died from a jellyfish. Oh no, his brother just got stung by jellyfish.
Oh, he got stung by jellyfish. His dad told him not to jump off the boat, and he did.
Oh, okay.
And he was surrounded by jellyfish in Florida, and he was just in agony because they were all over him. But he didn't die, but it established a strong memory.
Oh, okay. I thought there's something with like his brother in the book, but he says like my brother's dead now. But then the story he tells about the traumatic event, his brother doesn't die in the event. It's just that he's an old guy and his brother's even older. So he's just
yeah, he didn't die like when I was 16 in front of me.
No,
I wasn't eaten by a giant eel or something.
And then here Barnes confronts Norman. He has like stolen notes from his patient sessions, and he learns that Beth was like had a suicide attempt. So like Barnes is just immediately is like, "What's this fucking crazy lady doing now? Or she's gonna kill us all." It just comes out of nowhere. I mean, it shortens a lot of things really quickly, but it makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, it's part of the problem with the random storytelling in this movie, where just big details pop out of nowhere. It's seemingly unrelated to anything else.
Yeah. Here we have Harry's awake and he's eating breakfast enthusiastically. Harry's like, he's still being cryptic. It's like, yeah, we're all gonna die down here, but like, it's gonna be cool whatever happens. Harry eats calamari and then it gets revealed to him, and then he starts like kind of acting like he's choking. And then he just says like he hates squid. And then I think it was Norman asked like, it's like, hey, you said we're all gonna die down here. Do you still believe that? You just go, you afraid to die, Norman? Which is like a big trailer moment for this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson does like a great job with like what little things they gave him, and he makes the most of that character. Which one thing I didn't realize that Samuel L. Jackson's the same age as our dad.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that.
We have Norman and Ted talk. Ted thinks Harry's like hiding information so he can like publish a book, because this goes into like Ted's like insecurities about like astrophysicists. If they don't like do anything by 35, they never will. So,
Yeah.
So, but then Edmonds pops up. She's the remaining like kind of like crew member of the station, and she tells them that they need to look at the computers. So then we have titles, the first exchange. They talk about a saturation effect, which I don't really know what that means, but Harry spots it. Like if it was a saturation effect, it would be random, but he finds a pattern somehow that nobody else picks up on.
They think the chips are going bad.
Oh, okay.
Because in the book they described how all the computers and screens were in these huge enclosed boxes, and they said that like the helium, a high helium environment plays hell with microprocessors, but it has something to do with how heat is dissipated and all that. So all the computers are in sealed boxes. Not evident in this movie in any way, but it's just like
But they're able to like, they convert they find the pattern, they convert it to binary, they see like word breaks, they convert it to like a keyboard and like as if it was like a keyboard wrapped around a sphere, which I don't know, seems cool in the moment, but kind of a reach.
Yeah.
For how quickly they put it together.
It's a lot of deductive things going in one direction. The Sphere keyboard. The movie's called Sphere. Wow.
And so
that MIT education's really paying off, Dr. Freeman.
The first message they get that says, "Hello, how are you? I am fine. What is your name? My name is Jerry." And Barnes wants a last name for Jerry, so when he writes a report, it's like, I'm not writing a fucking report that says Jerry the alien. They type a message back where they ask like where Jerry's from. They get like evasive answers, and then there's just like kind of random one that says I am happy. And here, this is a good note because like Norman, it like points out the whole thing that nobody's thinking about. It's like, you know what would make me happy if Jerry had no emotions whatsoever. And they're like, why? It's like, well, if Jerry can be happy, what happens when Jerry gets mad?
Yeah.
Which is a great like kind of simplistic thing. That's, that's what makes the you know, the scienceless psychologist, like the great person to ask all the simple questions.
Right.
Because like, hey, like, you know, if I was in this situation, I might ask that question. It would be an important thing. Because the smart people aren't asking the question.
Yeah, there's jumping to conclusions. I want to do this one step at a time.
So we have titles: The Monster. They show a sonar screen which nobody's manning, and there's a giant squid on there, obviously. And Edmonds is outside, and like Norman and Beth like rush to get her back, but then they find her like crushed to death, Edmonds, and then they cut to Harry reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And then giant squid eggs start falling, and then Norman and Beth are running from the squid as they try to get to like the habitat entrance, but they're also carrying Edmund's body with them, so it's a pretty tense scene. And also they're like slipping on the squid eggs as they step on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, good weird like practical like weird sea life in this movie.
Oh yeah. It looks gross and strange.
And then suddenly the giant squid disappears from the sonar. So we have titles: Battle Stations. They go to talk to Jerry, but they find out that Jerry can just hear them, so they don't have to like type to him. They can just speak out loud. Jerry's getting angry. The giant squid is back. Apparently the base has a shock defense that it can put out, but when they activate it, it'll create electrical fires. I don't think that's in the book. I can't remember. Because I think the base just gets knocked around by the giant squid, and then just like, you know, it's the sea. Bad things happen when you shake an environment that can only work under very specific circumstances. Especially like with all the books I read about submarines, it's like, you know, the worst place in the world to die, because like just everything is, you're always losing oxygen. It's really easy to drown or die of decompression or have explosive decompression of your vessel. And fires can just happen anywhere. It's like, oh, we got water in the batteries. Well, that's going to create fire. And that's going to burn your oxygen. And that's going to, it's just a cascading effect of everything that's going to kill you.
Yeah, and you can't get poison gas loose in a sealed environment with all the air you have to breathe.
Or I think with like it was the Kursk, where it's like, they had some guys alive down there, and they had these things that could create oxygen, but if they touched water, they would explode.
Yeah. Yep. It was the, they were CO2 scrubbers.
Yeah.
They also had oxygen generating candles. I think we have those. I think the Russians went with a thing like, yeah, if it drops in water, it explodes. It's like, what's on a submarine for emergency use? It's like, well, it'll enthuse the men to be efficient and careful.
It'll keep you awake.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. It's hard to stay awake when you're underwater for 3 days.
And running out of air.
Yeah. And food and water, ironically.
Well, you know, when a submarine goes down so far before it even explosively decompresses, especially the big titanium-hulled Soviet ones, the air gets under so much pressure it just bursts into flames. And that's before this thing crushes. It's weird. Russians know all about it. They can tell you all the ways to die at sea.
Oh, yeah.
They've done it.
That's Russian testing.
Yep.
How did this man die?
It's also great when you put liquid-fueled missiles in your submarines, where the liquid fuel, if it hits salt water, it forms sulfuric acid that just floats through the air like a gift. And then when you put your helmet on or your mask on, it's like, oh, I'm not going to breathe. It's like, no, the sulfuric acid is eating the filters. You have a little time, like 10 minutes, to contemplate what's about to happen, but... Yeah, but we got the Americans are going to kill us. It's like, you're going to kill your own people. The Americans aren't going to have to do a thing.
The squid starts attacking the base. They don't really show it. It probably would be a bad idea too. It probably would have looked bad for whatever thing.
Yeah, it worked in the movie
Yeah.
because you just have the sonar that's unmanned, and then you can just imagine this giant squid wrapping its tentacles around these, like basically the International Space Station underwater,
Yeah.
and under a couple thousand or how many atmospheres of pressure it was under, but a lot.
Yeah.
Because remember, bolts break off and fly around with the velocity of bullets fired from a high-powered rifle at that depth. So that's fun.
Barnes sends Ted to the control room. The base starts flooding. Ted releases a valve to increase the pressure, because else the base will be crushed under the pressure because there's not enough pressure inside the base to keep it from being crushed. But then he releases too much, so now the base is going to explode.
Yeah, in a bizarre game of what goes up must come down.
So he gets like knocked back and unconscious, and so then like Beth and Norman go to turn the thing to right things. Barnes tells Norman to pull the electrical lever, but then like Beth is telling him not to. And this is the part where like Barnes is like, "No, she's crazy. Don't believe her.
She's gonna kill us all." It's like, that's a intuitive leap. Okay, she's trying not to, act. You're standing in briny water from the sea, which means it has a high salt content and everything else. And it's like, let's electrify the base. It's like immediately I'd be like, no, let's not stand in superconducting salt water and just run current through it. See what happens.
But then the shaking stops without them having to pull the lever, and then the message pops up: "I will kill you all," from Jerry. And even though there's dangers of electrical fires if they pull the switch, don't worry, they have electrical fires anyways. So now they have to put out fires. Harry won't wake up. Barnes gets trapped because an emergency door is closing. But then Barnes tries to brace one of the doors open, or if it's that door. But then, like, the thing he's bracing with breaks out, and so he gets cut in half by the emergency door. Which I don't remember that happening in the book because it seems so stupid for, one of the most cautious, smartest people in here to just die so stupidly. He just died like a Friday the 13th teenager.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of silly.
Norman gets knocked silly, but then Ted comes in to save him. But then Ted gets hit with falling debris in the head again, and then he's like trapped by that debris right under a grate where fire comes up and just like roasts his face like a flamethrower.
Yeah.
And a very violent death.
It's a very grisly death scenes all of a sudden.
Yeah. Which is like, I think this was a PG-13 movie, but it's like pretty. There's like,
well, this guy's just getting barbecued alive.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah.
And then for some reason they end on like the cameras kind of like zooms in on Beth like taking in the aftermath, and he's like, oh, everybody's dead now. And then I have that being the end of Act 2 because everybody's dead except for 3 people. So we have Act 3. We have Norman is talking to Jerry, and Norman's like trying to explain death and fear to Jerry, but here Jerry says to stop calling him Jerry, and then Jerry stops talking to Norman. Norman tells Harry that everyone is dead except for them and Beth because he just woke up and he's just like chilling.
Yeah.
He's just detached from everything. Norman goes to reset the sub. His diving suit like malfunctions on the way. The Beth's not like responding to his screams because she said she was going to watch him. But Harry gets on the monitor and guides Norman back to the habitat because he's getting like bubbles in his mask so he can't see.
Oh, okay.
And then a sea snake like shows up and attacks Norman, which is a thing in the book too.
Snakes. Sea snakes are actually genuinely terrifying too.
Yeah.
They're awful. I mean, it's
Yeah, they explain in the book, and they do here, but like, yeah, the most venomous things in the world are like things in the ocean.
yeah.
Which in the book they speculate it's because life started in the ocean, so it's had more time to develop like more poisonous stuff. And they're like, hey, give them more time, and then like the land animals will will be even more poisonous.
Oh, there's things in the ocean like sea snakes where it's like, is this nerve gas or venom? I mean, it's so lethal. There's also clams that are like that too.
Norman gets back inside and he's in like a tired panic. Beth is missing. They find her and they talk to her over the intercom. They're suspicious of like what she was doing. She gets back inside, but then they're just suspicious of each other. Here's where they learn that Beth went inside the sphere, which at this point you can guess like, oh, if you go inside the sphere, like things in your subconscious are becoming manifest, but they haven't blatantly pointed that out yet.
Yeah, I remember because of course I read the book before the movie. I remember like figuring that out. It was something about Jules Verne and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and as soon as he said it, because he was the guy. Which one was that? The guy that was asleep? Harry. As soon as he said it, I was like, "Oh, so you can manifest your fears into reality." I mean, I was like 14 years old. And it's like, okay, I see. I don't see how this resolves, but I see what the problem is now. But like, what's the resolution going to be? This is going to be crazy. It's going to be great. Not so much.
So I think Beth leaves, and then like, they explain like Beth said like that Harry's lying, and like there wasn't food in here. That's why she went to the ship, and then now there is food here. But then like she leaves, but then Norman like, hey, you dropped your book, and he sees that Harry's already has like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and then it's like almost like a comical nightmare. Like he just like the books start appearing out of all orifices and everywhere, and it's like, and then like of course Harry's none the wiser. It's like, what's wrong, Norman? It's like those books were always there.
They always have 50,000 copies of this book.
But no, I mean here Harry actually doesn't take note of any of this stuff. He just kind of keeps reading. They show Beth taking some pills, which I don't know. That scene didn't really need to be there. Now that I think of it, because she put some pills in her pocket, but then that doesn't go anywhere either.
Yeah.
I think they're just setting up like, oh, is she gonna like off herself with pills because she's the crazy lady? Because that's the way she like attempted suicide before. She just downed a bunch of pills and called Norman because they were dating at the time, or just broke up, something like that.
No, he was her therapist, and they were sleeping together. They're both married to other people. He's a real sleaze bag. That's like sleaze bag stuff.
Yeah, let's date my patient. The most vulnerable way to do things in the world.
Yeah, just date someone who's got problems.
Norman goes talk to Jerry. And he's like talking about how like the book doesn't exist past page 87 because Harry said that like he stops reading at that because he gets too scared because that's when the squid shows up in the book. He gets the message from Jerry saying stop calling him Jerry. So Norman starts reworking the code cipher that Ted came up with. Beth arms the Panther explosives, which I don't remember that's what they're called in the book. Here it's just a fun thing.
I remember I went and looked. It's like, are Panther explosives like deep sea explosives? And it's like, no, it's just it's just a prop thing.
Okay.
Because I looked. I was like, why would they have that on there in big letters? Are they getting paid by is this like ad placement for underwater high explosives?
Big underwater high explosives. Here to control the narrative. Norman like recodes the cipher and finds out that like the name's Harry instead of Jerry. And it's like, oh, so they've been talking to Harry's subconscious this whole time. That's posing as an alien for some reason. Norman has a meeting with Beth explaining the problem with Harry. About this is basically where they state blatantly like, oh, our thoughts are becoming manifest. So that's what's happening here. It's not the alien sphere. It's just us. Beth and Norman like go through all the drugs in the habitat to try to create a sedative that'll get Norman in a dreamless sleep, because they think like it's his dreams that are creating like all the manifestations. So in the book it's weird because like these like black crew members show up guarding his door while he's sleeping. Like they're like these like Amazonian like black women that are like guarding the door, and they're just like subconscious manifestation. That doesn't happen in the movie.
No, it would be cool if it did.
Because I remember when that happened in the book. It was like, wait, where did these people suddenly come from? They're like, oh, it's part of the manifestation. So
These were other crew members.
which that happens a lot in the book, where like at some point someone's imagining being rescued by like Navy SEALs, and they're on their way, and then they just suddenly disappear. It's like, oh, it was a manifestation.
Well, remember the autopsies of all the creatures that appear and attack them in the book?
Yeah.
Where she's like, they don't have like digestive organs and they can't breathe, and it's like, where does this come from?
Which here they do that too, but then like she says like, I made a mistake, I found them or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that's just because that's a further manifestation.
And by the way, none of this is very clear. It's all just kind of happening, and we're moving on. Just keep the camera moving.
Okay, so yeah, they get the drugs together, and they give them the sedative without problem. So like in the book, they were stopped by some manifestations. Beth and Norman, they get a message from topside that there's like rescue is like a few hours away. Water starts filling the habitat, and Norman gets attacked by some sea snakes. But then Beth just kind of casually strolls in, and while he's like screaming, and she just grabs him and says like, they're only dangerous at night. And it's like, well, you're 1,000 feet on the ocean. How do you know what fuck time of day it is?
Yeah, I thought that myself. It's like, oh, how's the sunrise looking in a zone of complete blackness?
Beth lures Norman to like a lab and locks him in. She says that Norman is the one manifesting everything, and so she leaves a sedative for him to use on himself, but he doesn't want to do it. And then like the lab starts flooding, and she flubs the lab and it's like cuts off the oxygen, and he grabs like an oxygen mask, and once it's just like a bottle with a mask on it, which I read some trivia that says like those won't work that deep.
Yeah,
but it's fine. I don't know. Something similar happens in the movie. I can't remember. Or is he just free breathing, trying to swim away?
No, I think he grabs something that looks like a medical mask with a bottle on it. But
okay. So yeah, he swims out the hatch, but like, I think they mention it, but basically you're supposed to like, oh yeah, like he just jumped into like freezing cold water, and he should really be at death's door by the time he gets in, but he's just kind of tired by the time he wakes his way back into the habitat, so that's fine. And then, but Beth starts seeing like images on the monitor that like mock her, and so she's like losing her mind. But like, it's actually happening, I guess. I don't know.
yeah.
Norman wakes his way back in, and he finds like, Norman wakes up. What is it? I meant to write that wrong. Norman gets back in the habitat. Harry wakes up. Beth opens the door, and it gets flooded with water, and like the dead upper half of Barnes is just like floating into her almost comically. It's like, hey, lady.
Thanks for the ride.
Then she's having a nervous breakdown because why wouldn't you? Look at all the crazy stuff. It's like, you're definitely going to die down here. But they come together and they figure out that they all went in the sphere. They all manifested stuff. Beth has set up an armed explosives. They're about to go off. So they get in the sub to make an escape. And they are suddenly transported to the spaceship. But somehow Norman realizes, like, no, this is an illusion. And so they do just cut back to them just, like, kind of, like, blindly flailing inside the sub. Like, this isn't actually happening, which is kind of... just kind of hilarious. It doesn't really like. I think it would work better if they were just like actually transported, but yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't, and it's not. Again, it's one of these things where we're just transitioning from one thing to another, and it's like, what are they doing now? Oh, okay, yeah. They didn't teleport. They just hallucinated. All right.
Yeah. And so yeah, they're able to like blindly reach for the panel and hit a button to do the emergency like release, and they start going up, and then the explosives go off. I don't know if they're like this powerful in the book, but here they just blow up the spaceship, they blow up the habitat, they blow up everything.
Yeah, it's like, how many explosives did she put her? I don't know. Explosives underwater are wildly effective though, because they have a lot more to compress with water than they do air. So they could be that destructive, but, for the sake of the movie, this is the story.
Yeah. And I guess that maybe that goes like, hey, if this airplane is super like, like resilient, why would an explosion just blow it up? And it's like, well, remember the one guy hit it with a hammer? It was like, okay. It's just like Newtonian, or it's like anti-Newtonian like fluid dynamics or whatever. It's like, if you hit it softly, it won't blow up, but if you hit it hard enough, it will.
Yeah, the ship's made of non-Newtonian metal. It's like oobleck if it was titanium and lead.
So yeah, they make it back to the surface. They make a point, and they kind of follow it up here, but in the book they make a point. It's like, hey, if you get to the surface and there's not a ship with like the proper docking thing, like you're gonna die up there, because you have to be basically put into a decompression chamber, even though you make it to the surface. You gotta get in there immediately, or you're gonna blow up. So it says decompression chamber day 1, but then suddenly it's 3 days later. But they don't like write that on screen. Somebody says it out loud. But I guess it was a reshoot. I guess people didn't believe they could decompress after 3 days, which I believe in the book it just says you need 90 hours. So.
Never had to decompress. I don't know.
Apparently, like it said, like audiences said it would take like at least 2 weeks to decompress from that, and it's like, well, how do they know? I thought Hollywood was famous for thinking all audiences are stupid.
Yeah, who's this test audience you find just a bunch of like undersea, oil pipe welders that are like, no, you see, it wouldn't work this way at all. It's like, oh, great, these guys are in town for their 6 weeks vacation, watching our movie.
So they get out of the decompression chamber. They're like getting ready for a debrief. So they put them in a room by themselves. And here's where they're trying to figure out what to tell everyone. In the book, they kind of like come up with a scenario that makes sense. But here they don't really do that. They just figure out, it's like, well, humanity can't handle this power where you can just manifest things into existence. And they don't want it to get in the wrong hands. Also, they're like, well, we're still alive, so we need to like not know about this stuff. So let's use the power to forget the sphere. So if we forget the sphere, then that'll solve all the paradoxes. So they hold hands, and then they like count to 3, and they basically just, kumbaya. They forgot the sphere, and then they just kind of open their eyes. And they're like, why are you holding my hand? Which is kind of how it happens in the book. In the book, that's basically the end of it. Here, they cut to the ocean floor. They did say that Norman said the sphere blew up, but here we see the sphere is fine, and then it just ascends out of the ocean. All the people on the boat see it, and it just like flies into space, and presumably goes back through the black hole or whatever. So,
yeah.
And then that's the end of Sphere, the movie.
There also is kind of a slight ambiguity in the book on whether what's Beth
Yeah.
gave up the power.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, there's kind of like she seems like everyone else seems to totally forget, but she seems a little more like, because there's doubt there, like, oh, did she come out of it earlier, or did she really not give up the power?
Huh. Okay.
But then it's like it's not followed up on.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just like
Yeah, there's no Sphere 2.
Sphere 2, double Sphere.
Um,
Because then in Sphere 2, you find out like the ship never existed. It was just the manifestation of the imagination of the pilot who they found dead, who was actually a NASA astronaut that was lost on a secret mission that no one knew about.
who was an autistic kid that lived in a snow globe.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just like, sure, why not?
Yeah, the stuff of the ship is way more complicated, especially in the book, because it keeps changing. There's like one point where Beth is basically imagining like who the crew was, and there's like some lady that's like 6 feet tall that kind of looks like her, naked in a cryogenic thing, and then she's like, I think she was the only one that didn't make a mistake, and then that's how she ended up here. And then because like when they first get on there's no crew, and then like once they start getting the manifestation power, then suddenly there's crews, but it's like reflecting their imagination of what might have happened.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting investigation where like you investigating it like alters the investigation. It's like you have to come up with a theory, and then your theory starts coming true, not because it is, but just because that's how this power works.
Yeah.
But again, they don't necessarily play that up in the movie, nor so in the book. But yeah.
Well, it's supposed to be a series coming up on a streaming service. And they've supposedly somebody's optioned it for in 2021 to be, but you know, then you hear like what Warner Brothers and HBO Max just did, and it's like, oh, okay, this is one of the $2 billion worth of things now they're shelving and not making and not releasing. So
let's pretend we made it and make it a $400 million tax cut.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say like the book is better, but like the book isn't great. I mean, it's fine science fiction, but it's not Michael Crichton's best. It's just kind of an interesting idea that goes nowhere.
Yeah, it's not something you'd regret reading casually over a week or so. But the movie's like, I've been robbed of 2 hours and 15 minutes of my life watching actors that are good in a movie that looks great.
Yeah.
And does build suspense and does certain things well, but then the payoff is just like it completely vaporizes. It's like, no, it's like Bob Newhart woke up and it's like, I own an inn in Vermont. It's like, no, you didn't. Yeah, it's kind of silly.
And it bombed at the box office, so of course again. So, but like you said, there's someone's optioned this for I mean, it would make a better TV show because you can just get more into the detail, but
yeah,
that doesn't always make things better. But it's just more potential for our favorite thing is well-crafted exposition.
Well, you could tell a better story if you like explored like why did the aliens? Is this what destroyed this alien civilization? This power they invested in this fear? Is this a test to see how different people they meet encounter will handle this power? They're like, there's a lot of ways you could go,
Yeah.
but you don't, it's just, everyone's just wildly hallucinating weird things. And then it's like, oh, the best thing to do is forget. And it's like, well, yeah, that's the best thing to ever do. I mean, if the Nazis could have forgotten, they would have, yeah, that's always the best thing to do, but it doesn't make for a very compelling payoff in a movie.
But even like, this has, you could see like, kind of coming from Star Trek the motion picture, where it's like V'ger was sent out there and ends up coming back as like a completely different version of itself, but it's just kind of like it's just seeking out information, and then this is what it's become. It's not intentional, it's just what happened. The sphere could be a probe for all we know.
Yeah.
Although in every instance, like in the book and the movie, they do point this thing out. It's like, no, this ship went out and retrieved this thing. It's like it's never mentioned that it's man-made, but it could be like a double, some sort of like double time loop thing where it's like, no, the sphere is an American ship from like even further in the future, captured by a future ship, and then that ended up back in the past.
Yeah. we needed to capture the sphere in the future to dream this ship into existence in order to crash into the ocean so that a bunch of nervous guys in the 80s could find it. I mean, in a book, too, they had a lot of things like with Barnes. Barnes was a lot more duplicitous in the book because he would tell certain people certain things but never told everyone everything. Because the one lady, I think it was Beth, somebody got into computer stuff and they found out, like, well, you know what Barnes really does? Like, he is a technology recovery guy.
Yeah.
They want to get all the technology off the ship because it's also because, you know, in the time the book was written, the Soviet Union was still a thing. It's like, we can't have the Russians finding this. And now that we know it's an American ship, no one can know about it because it could like alter things, and you know the technology's on here. But it seems like a pretty big leap for, you know, because it's like the ship's actually from 50 years in the future of 1987. It's like they made some fantastic leaps in material science. But considering we're like, what, 20 years away from when the ship was made, it's like, I don't think we're anywhere close to this kind of shit. So, but that's just, you know, science, especially guys like Crichton always believe in progress in science. And they don't, you know, Crichton was, for kind of being a right winger, which he turned out to be at the end of in some of his beliefs, he's like, he never really gave credit to the corrosive properties capitalism has on progress. Because it just holds things back sometimes. It's like, no, we can't let the new stuff out. Because even didn't they say like the computers, like the displays, said they were made by, you know, Intel or something, like it was like, oh yeah, these are recognizable manufacturers.
Yeah, there's like a little joke in the book where they say like, it says like Diet Coke. They find a Diet Coke on the spacecraft, and they're like, all right, I'm investing in that because like it exists 50 years from now. And then like look on the back and there's Japanese writings like, well, hold up, that means it's got like reacquired like 4 times. So like maybe don't do that.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, Crichton was a big Japanophobe too. He wrote 2 books about how the Japanese are going to steal the world from us, and it's like, well, that turned out to be like a complete nonsense. But now it's the Chinese.
And now he's dead. So.
Now he's dead, so it doesn't matter. He wrote some great, but I love this stuff. This wasn't his best. This was like a better version of this is Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama, which was written probably 12 years before this.
Yeah. And that's just all mystery. It's like there's no you don't come to an ultimate conclusion. It's just a really cool investigation of this whole mystery that you have a limited window to investigate it. And all the weird stuff that happens in between is great. And then they don't solve anything. They just kind of got to go.
Yep. It's like, well, our time on the ship is up. Now it's time for, I think he wrote 5 sequel books to that. I think it ended with Garden of Rama.
Yeah, I think like there's probably other successors. But the thing I can think of, I think Andy Weir is like a good successor to like Michael Crichton.
Yeah.
I mean, his stuff is like almost too technical, but it's still great.
Yeah, it's his stuff is Andy Weir's kind of look like what I call like the fast forward techno science fiction writer, because he's going to stop and explain all this stuff, and then we're going to like leap into action, and then we're going to stop and have like in the middle, right before like the mushroom cloud reaches its crescendo, it's like, you know why this happened, and then we're going to talk about it, and then the mushroom cloud's going to continue. It's almost like a stop frame, and it's like, oh yeah, and this is why. Whereas Michael Crichton always established like core central premises and kind of wrote around those elliptically. It's like, we have this and we know this can do this, and it was always, Michael Crichton was always like vaguely 10 years ahead.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, this isn't like current, but this is set like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or in the case of this, you could set it currently because it's all stuff that hasn't happened yet, like the future spaceship. And
I did think it was neat in the novel they're explaining black holes, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's it. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, Crichton got it right. Like, no, he was basically just explaining Einstein's theory of relativity, and it's like only just like in the past few years we've had equipment that could observe it, so we could prove that.
yeah,
Well, not prove it, but it's like, oh look, this is how space time works, where it's like an object is, an object's mass doesn't attract things purely because it's big and attracts things because it's warping space time. So, which is in the book, and here we've had stuff to observe that. So
Yeah, we're like 5% closer to proving it. Well, a bunch of guys at CERN are 5% closer to proving it. It's not conclusively proven, but it's like trends indicate.
And they do have they don't do it here in the movie. There's a fun thing in the book where they're explaining like a bowl of fruit and then like a what does he have, like a ball bearing, and like throws it in the bowl, and it's like, see, if you throw it fast enough, you go past the planets, but if you're not going fast enough, it'll just roll back into the planets.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do remember that.
And then the real fun stuff is orbital mechanics. It's like, hey, if I look at that thing, can I go to it in space? It's like, are you in a planet's gravitational pull? Then no. You have to fly in a circle. The weird thing where you have to like point your ship away from the thing to get closer to it.
Can I go to the moon from here? It was like, not in a straight line. What do you have to do? Fill a chalkboard with equations just to know where the moon's going to be. Then you have to design the rocket, which is a whole bunch of other equations.
I forget which of the like. I think it was Shepard. They called him like Captain Rendezvous because he figured out orbital mechanics, because they were having that thing where like they're trying to rendezvous with a like a module in space that they've sent up there, and it's like they're pointing their ship at it and then like going towards it, and they miss it. And they're like, what's going on here? And then he figured it out. It's like, oh, we're traveling in a circle. To get to it, we have to increase our circle to get in it.
You have to fly away from it to catch up to it.
Yeah. It's real mind fuckery.
Yeah, because like on Earth, everything's dead reckoning. It's like, well, there it is. Head towards it. Not so much in 3 dimensions. It doesn't work that way, especially in weird planetary orbits.
Which we have to get all the flat earthers up into space and teach them orbital mechanics, and then they'll finally believe.
If you can teach someone who actually believes in flat Earth the alphabet, I'd be impressed. Someone who actually like embraces that, because again, that's all based on dead reckoning. Hey, this is what I see. If I put this pop can down, it's like, it's not going anywhere. This is obviously flat. It's like, no, it's being held down because this thing we're sitting on spinning at 11,000 miles an hour. Well, I can't see that. It's like, no, it's scalable. Of course you can't. If you could, we would never evolve.
And we never stop vomiting.
Well, yeah. God wouldn't do that to us. Yes, he would.
So yeah, like, but I would say that the movie here, like, it is the book. It's just, it's edited so weird. It doesn't feel good.
No. You feel vaguely ill. This isn't a good movie to like, I'm getting a pizza and watching me some Sphere, because no, you're going to be so just discombobulated by the end of like, what happened and why did it happen? More importantly, why did this happen?
But yeah, that was Sphere.
That was it.
So catch it if you want. I said just the book over the movie, but again, they both have inherent disappointment in them.
I think this is Michael Crichton's only Alien type book too.
Really? Okay.
I don't think he did another like. No. This is as close as he came, which makes sense because it's
well, I mean, technically, wait, no, Andromeda Strain technically, but that's not.
What's alien viruses?
Yeah,
like it's not like we have a plan.
I always remember like the cover looked cool. I think it was called Prey. It was like nanomachine stuff. I never read that one.
It wasn't very good.
Okay. Yeah, as much as I like a lot of Crichton stuff, he wrote way more books, and they aren't all good. But
no, there's a lot of ideas floating around. But yeah, I think this is only like extraterrestrial book. And interestingly, this book was originally written right after the Andromeda Strain. It was almost to be a companion piece to the Andromeda Strain, but he couldn't work it out, so he just did other books and then came back to this as this idea, which became its kind of a standalone thing.
I mean, well, let's see here. I mean, there's a lot of Crichton things where it's like, let's gather, the best scientists in the world to try to figure this thing out. But I mean, it is kind of that way in Jurassic Park. It is that way in Geronimo Strain. It is here in Sphere. Not Congo, but I never read Congo. I just only seen the.
What about Airframe? That was like the best engineers.
Yeah, Airframe. That's probably maybe one of the least known Crichton books that I love. That was a great book, but not because it's like a great story. It's just like, hey, here's a cool way to deliver all this technical detail about airplanes.
Yeah.
But there's like no way to make that a movie. It's like, hey, the DC-10 that was like famously for being a terrible airplane is actually one of the most safest airplanes ever built. Too bad.
Well, yeah, and then like Boeing, it's like, hey, let's take an existing airframe, drop the engines a little bit to make them more efficient, and then put weird software in there that prevents a stall by straightening the plane out, even though like the people who were supposed to be flying the plane weren't trained how to use the software, and it just nosedived them into the ground at 400 miles an hour because it was technically continuing to prevent the stall. Yeah. It's like, yeah, nobody really. I can't even explain that properly. I watched 2 documentaries on it, and I'm still like, okay, why does it how is nosedive? I understand a stall is bad because you're just going to go into a flat spin because your engines can't throw you forward. So your solution to that is to keep pushing the nose down and then do it. And the more the pilot resists, the more it gets caught in a loop. No, must push the nose down. We're going to stall. And then we're just like, nah! And you think the computer would be like, no, wait, another destructive event will occur now. But nope, it just... And then Boeing tries to bring like pilots from third world countries, and like that is the only place it happened. But it's also like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a good idea to get into
I remember
a logic loop with pilots who have seconds to make decisions. And there is an override button, but you literally, if you not specifically train on what to do, you won't hit it in time. You're going to smash into the ground first.
I remember Airbus had problems because the way their cockpit is set up is they don't have like the big yokes like the Boeing does. It's like the pilot has a left-handed joystick, the co-pilot has a right-handed joystick.
Yeah.
They can't see each other steering the plane, and so there's been troubles where it's like, if your co-pilot isn't as trained and you don't see him doing the wrong thing, then you can put your airplane in a mountain pretty quickly. Whereas with the Boeing's like, you can see the guy doing the thing. It's like, don't do that.
Stop what you're doing. You're like, oh, don't look at my joystick.
No, it's my plane.
We know the difference between like Boeing and like there's a whole philosophical difference there too, because where did Boeing make all its money before commercial aircraft, military aircraft?
Oh yeah.
Airbus is a conglomerate of aeronautical engineers, and Airbus has a military division. They make combat aircraft over there too, but all Boeings are just Stratofortresses, just modernized. It's like that was their big project. It's a wide body aircraft that carries 30,000 pounds of bombs. It's just now we design planes where the bottom doesn't open because that would piss the passengers off, and we're just going to store a bunch of people. And it's like, use the same controls and everything. You don't need to change it, but it's a completely different philosophy. And more aircraft. I mean, I don't know how many other countries there are, because it's like Airbus and Boeing are the big commercial aircraft people, but more aircraft are designed like Boeing's and Airbus.
Yeah.
Because like the Russians, their passenger planes, I mean, they have all the great Russian stuff, like they're wildly dangerous and efficient, but they operate more like a Boeing 747 they do an Airbus. Because the Russians also made a lot of military aircraft, and it's like, put the same thing in. I
always like that. the British engine makers. Like Rolls-Royce. I'm not sure if Rolls-Royce still makes airplane engines. But
Yeah, that's the only profitable Rolls-Royce that exists.
Okay.
The Rolls-Royce military engine company and the Rolls-Royce car company, two separate entities now. They were one thing at one time. But yeah, the one that makes the giant engines, they're the profitable ones.
And the other one was Pratt and Whitney, which I don't know if they're still around, but
I think they probably got absorbed. Because what do we have now? Like, who are the big military contract? You got like Boeing, and then
is McDonnell Douglas still around?
I think they all got absorbed into what's the other one that's not Boeing? It's
Lockheed.
yeah, because it's Lockheed Martin. Because yeah, there used to be like 5, 6 different. Now there's like 2. Because you got General Dynamics, United Technologies. Those are the big military contractors, and yeah, they're all absorbed into one or two different entities.
That weird one. Was it like Fairchild Republic or something like that?
That was a GovCorp.
Oh, okay.
That was they made the Warthog, and nobody thought they could make money like Boeing and all the other. They're like, we can't make money making the Warthog, so they just built a government corporation called Republic Fairchild. They were a manufacturer in World War II of aircraft, but they kind of like, it's like they resurrected the name and created a board of directors, but essentially it's like a government. And it's like, we need you to build these A-10 Thunderbolts, which is what they were really called. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we can make these. And then make a bunch of spare parts because they're going to be in service for like 50 years. And yeah, been around since the 60s.
Yeah,
and they...
the Warthog was the only aircraft ever planned by the military that actually came in under budget.
Yeah.
Because nobody wanted it, but it had to be created.
Yeah, I think like the subsystems, like General Electric made the engines, and I think they but it was assembling it and putting it out, like that was all essentially done by the government.
Yeah,
it's like the post office. Like, we're going to create an organization and it has to be profitable. But once the A-10s were done, it's like didn't matter. Just make us like 100 years worth of spare parts, because we're going to be flying these things forever.
Well, I know they've been wanting to replace the C-130s for a long time, but it's just astronomically expensive to replace it.
You're talking about, procurement program would be $500 billion before you even got it, the first thing off the ground.
Or like the Russians do the same thing. Are the Tupolovs still around?
Yeah, oh yeah. Tupolov, Mikoyevin, or what they call MiG, all those still exist. But it exists in that Russian world of reality and fantasy where it's like, no, this is a highly profitable business. It's like, really, who do you sell these to? Oh, the Russian government. Does anyone else buy them? Not directly. Because now the Indians will buy the frames, but they want to put their own engines in them. I mean, well, that's just because they want a job environment. It's just like they have Apache attack choppers in the UK.
Yeah.
But they're called Augusta Westfield Apache because they have a whole different engine. They have a whole different combat suite in them and everything. But you couldn't tell them apart. It's like, oh, it's an Apache. It's like, well, kind of. We sold them the frame, and then they put their own in, because it's just a jobs thing. Which is why as soon as we got to hurry up and get this war in Afghanistan over, because we think the Russians are massing troops at the Ukrainian border. It's like, well, okay, so yeah, in the Afghan war, and then it's like immediately our defense our contractors are bailed out by, we're giving money or giving weapons to the Ukrainians. It's like, yeah, that's just keeps rolling. That whatever company makes Javelin missiles, they got contracts for the next 20 years, because we've about given them all away. Because everyone thinks we have like 2 million of those things in inventory or something. No, they only have like 10,000 of them.
But as we can see, they're wildly effective, so build more.
Yeah. Well, that's why the Stinger missile, they were going to dump that before the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and then us helping the Mujahideen with those.
Yeah.
Because they were like, these are really expensive per unit. I think at the time it was the most expensive per unit, like man-portable anti-air rocket you could, and they were like, oh, this is too expensive, we got to get rid of this. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, we know where we can field test these against the equipment we actually want to destroy. It's like 2 for 1. It's like, what's the downside? You're giving anti-air missiles to terrorists, but we can work around that.
Yeah, but when you're spending like $1,500 to shoot down a $23 million helicopter, it's like...
Oh no, when the Stingers, because I think the Stingers they gave the Mujahideen were the first generation into the second, they were like $10,000 in $70s. Like they were, like, it had something to do with how, because it was radar guided,
Yeah.
and it was like, it wasn't the warhead it was like the battery to power that to stay in it long enough and be useful. It was like really, really, really expensive. So it was like, why does this missile cost so much? It's like, we got an $8,000 battery in it. It's like, why does it have to cost that much? Because it has to be shelf stable for years. And it's like, oh, because we can't send these out. And they're like, well, this one doesn't work. Give me another one, you know. So yeah, it's what's saved though. It's like the Law rocket too. Now that's that's not guided, but that had a real expensive development, because as soon as they like were ready to go in production, and then it's like, oh, they've introduced this new armor. Shit, this thing isn't going to work. So then they had to like as they're about ready to commit to production, they had to change the design. And yeah, there's a lot of those 80s and 70s weapon system stories where it's like, we always think the Soviets were the buffoons. It's like, oh no, we screwed up just as much as they did. Only our screw ups didn't lead to like the death of 1,500 people or something, or at least not 1,500 of our people. You know, always go test this.
Nice. If you like what you heard,
Yeah,
couldn't you?
If you've enjoyed this.
You can find us at anchor.fm/Verhoeven Effect or whatever podcast platform of your choice. You can rate us on that platform. You can rate us whatever you want, but the only thing to listen to is the highest rating. Remember, you control the algorithm. The algorithm doesn't control you. You also have at VerhoevenEffect.com, we have listener support where you can support us a monthly stipend of either 99 cents, $4.99, or $9.99. We're also at Twitter at Verhoeven Effect, Facebook Verhoeven Effect, and you can find us on YouTube on American Greed Factory. We do both that show and this show live and unedited. And we also have t-shirts at belowthecollar.com/Greed Factory. So for the Verhoeven Effect podcast, I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
Goodbye, America.
Goodbye, America. Oh, God, I got to piss like a tree.